I'm Nicole Carey, the Education Policy Director here at Advocates, and I've been asked to talk to you about the highs and lows of the 2025 regular legislative session. So we're going to focus on the highs and lows around education, considering our early childhood education, which is that system from birth through 5, and then the kindergarten through 12th grade space. So some of the highs I wanted to highlight are around student support. One of the kind of bigger education pieces of legislation that passed was the Bell to Bell No Cell Act. And this bill, now an act, did end up having widespread bipartisan support, and basically it requires every public and open enrollment charter school district in the state to have a prohibition on students having cell phones during the school day. And so every district has to have a policy on that, and that started during the 2025-2026 school year. The Bell to Bell No Cell, obviously it's from when the school day starts to when the school day ends. And what happened is that there were many districts that participated in a pilot program prior to this legislation coming through with the mandate, and by and large there were positive impacts seen from students not having access to their cell phone during the day, such as mental health impacts on the students being more positive, and also fewer disciplinary infractions and referrals for school districts. And so now that is a requirement for all districts with this current school year. Another kind of smaller piece of legislation that increases some student support is a follow-up to something that came through in the LEARNS Act in 2023. So this bill specifically was filed to increase the amount of literacy tutoring grants. And these grants were started after LEARNS. And basically it's a stipend or a specific grant for eligible students to help get them some literacy tutoring, like individual, that their parents can hire someone, an approved tutor, to give them that individual extra literacy support. And so what happened is that initially those grants were for $500 per eligible student. And the legislature went back this session and increased that individual grant amount to $1,500 per eligible student. And so now for those younger children who end up qualifying for the grant program, their parents will be able to access $1,500 to have that literacy tutoring set up for them. Shifting gears a little bit, another high of this session was in workforce support, and specifically for your early childhood educators. So one of the things that happen is early childhood educators, they might work at a facility provider in your community. They might work in a family care home or something like that. And this legislation allows early child care providers who receive public funding from the Department of Education to participate in the Arkansas Teacher Retirement System. And this was seen as a benefit for educators to help support that workforce who typically has lower wages, lower workforce supports, and we know about 31% of early childhood educators in our state currently qualify for Medicaid. This piece of legislation opens up this opportunity for providers to participate, but it doesn't come with any state funding attached. Rules for how this will work in practice will have to be promulgated and implemented through the Arkansas Teacher Retirement System. And part of what is coming is to require the employer to have an employer match in addition to the employee contributing to that retirement account. And so once the rules are passed, this will be an option for providers to to implement for their employees. Another education high is specifically around what students in kindergarten through 12th grade are required to be taught. So there are certain laws that have different content requirements or curriculum requirements, and one of those that came up during this session was called the Baby Olivia Bill, or the Baby Olivia Video Bill. And this legislation would have required every student to be shown a video produced by a third-party vendor that showed some aspects of human fetal development, in addition to showing a high-definition ultrasound. Using this specific video from this third-party provider would have put an actual vendor in the law, and there were a lot of concerns about the actual accuracy of this video, and so it was considered a definite high and a win that this piece of legislation did not pass. Now, moving straight into the lows, all of this conversation about Baby Olivia ended up resulting in a couple other bills getting filed with similar themes, such as requiring a human fetal development discussion with ultrasound, showing an ultrasound and the fertilization to embryo to birth process through other means. So we ended up having a bill passed that is going to require the Arkansas standards for what is required to be taught to include a human fetal growth and development portion for an appropriate grade that will require the ultrasound video and that fertilization through birth process. It does not have the specific video that was concerning actually written into the law. Of course, if the Department of Education puts out, hey, these resources fit the new standards type guidance for districts, then we do think that same video would be on there. However, so that's why it's still a low for us. Additionally, Arkansas has the second highest teen pregnancy rate and teen birth rate in the nation. And two of the main factors that that influence that are our lack of access to contraceptives, especially for young people, and the lack of good information through school-based sex education. And so instead of this route of piecemealing different parts of sex ed and putting it through the legislative process, what we think would be better is to have comprehensive sex ed offered in our schools so that students have the information they need to make the best choices for their health. Another low from the legislative session was no new investment in early childhood education. We know that for our state-funded preschool program, the Arkansas Better Chance for School Success, that has been flat funded for the last decade. And we really need new investment and new funding to meet the needs of our kids, especially our young kids. And so even with the retirement example I gave earlier, there was no state funding attached to that. And so we think policies like that could have a much more widespread benefit if there was state funding attached. And lastly, I also did want to mention one of the, not as a high or a low, just a note on education during the 2025 session. One of the bigger pieces of education legislation was the Arkansas Access Act. And that was really touted and promoted as a bill to make changes in higher education. And while it does do some of that, it also included some kindergarten through 12th grade changes as well. And so just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that and that it wasn't strictly about higher ed, specifically like the Arkansas colleges and universities. Thanks.